In this video, I'm going to do the full underpainting of this gorgeous still life. Now, if you'd also like to paint along with me, part 2 is available completely for free, and the link to that is in the description box below. The link will also include the tracings and the reference photos so you can paint along with me. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm beginning with my lean painting medium. I'm going to put a small puddle to one side and then go into the burnt umber and create myself a really nice creamy mixture. I'm going to use a sponge to apply. Dip the sponge into this mixture, and then we're going to cover the entire canvas with this mixture. I always start in the corners and dispense into the corners and then go over my image. I will stress at this point, please fix your drawing, otherwise you will completely lose it at this point. You can use a pencil fixative, and I will stress again, please only apply that very, very lightly. If you are unfamiliar with this technique, do check out the video that's just popped up on screen, and I'll also put a link to that in the description box below, because in this video I cover all of the techniques and all of the materials that you'll need to make this process work. Once I've got a covering everywhere, turn it over and just wipe away that excess oil, or you could simply use a paper towel. What I do at this stage, I usually remove all of the mixture from the canvas so that you're not tempted to go into that wet area. From this point forward, you'll be just using the dry oil paint, or you'll be erasing. So I begin using an eraser just to start removing some of the lighter areas. Remember, different tools will give you a different effect. So I decided at this point that the normal eraser wasn't working out so great and was leaving more dirty marks than it was erasing. So I switched now to a putty eraser. And that means I'm able to constantly keep kneading that eraser and keeping it nice and clean. So I'm beginning using the reference photo and really focusing on where I can see that bright sunlight, and that's where I'm beginning with the erasing. Now I am going to speed the footage up slightly for you because this is very repetitive, but of course I'll keep doing a little voiceover and pointing out areas that I think are of a particular interest. So here I've switched to a Q-tip, and again that's to get a slightly softer look, and I'm going to be jumping between using this Q-tip and using the putty eraser, and also using rags as well. So I'm constantly jumping. Now I will say I am actually working on a MDF board, and the paint does behave completely different when you're using a board rather than a canvas board. It does behave a little bit different. Sometimes it can be more difficult to erase. This is my own reference photo, so I'm actually wanting to do this for going on the walls. So I chose to use MDF board so that when it's done I'm able to get this framed and put it on our own walls. So now I've switched to a small detail brush, and here I've switched to a dome blender. So the small detail brush was just while I was working around tighter areas, and then I'm wanting a really soft application of the burnt umber. So I've switched now to my dome blender brush. Any soft brush will work for this. And I'm really just focusing on getting a really dark background. There's quite a lot going on in this photograph. in the background, but we have no intentions of including that in the final painting. We're going to really create a nice loose background and no real detail in there. Notice that I've gone completely over the bottle. We want to be able to see that background through the through that glass bottle. So I'm still with that dome blender, and I'm trying to get some of the angle lines for this table. So it is really important that you pay attention to the angles. And I'm also again using that dome blender to really create some very soft shadows on the table. So this is the beauty of this particular technique and using oils, is that I'm not worrying that some of my marks are covering over the cup and the teapot and the milk. It doesn't really matter, because of course we can go straight back to erasing. So at the moment, rather than worry about painting around the teapot or the cup while I get the lines on the table, I just go right over them. I am a little lighter in pressure, so I'm not putting heavy paint over those images, but it does mean I can get a really good flow on the tabletop and get some of these lines in there. Back to a small brush now as I really start to darken up some of these shadows. So here I've switched to the Typist eraser. I absolutely love this tool for getting some fine details. What's wonderful about this, of course, is you can sharpen it with a pencil sharpener and get some really fine details. So now I'm using that to erase and bring the details back on the teapot. So here I'm using a paper towel, and I've just dipped it into a little bit of medium, which will help erase even further. So why not use an eraser? Well, actually I want a really soft look, and again you can see with the erasers that they really take the paint right back to the white of the canvas, and sometimes you don't want that. So I've used a paper towel to kind of create a nice soft area, and then gone back in with that Typist eraser to put a real bright shine on the teapot. So moving over to the little milk bottle now, and again just focus on those lights and darks. I'm jumping between adding on and taking off, and never just stay with just the eraser until I've done it, or just the umber until I've done it. I always jump between one and the other. working as I see the lights and darks, really trying to focus on creating the tonal elements. You're looking for a finished picture, but just in one colour. Sometimes it does help to turn your reference photo into a black and white or into a sepia so that you're able to just focus on the tones. So this is a 12 by 12 square canvas or canvas board, or MDF board I should say. And I've gone for this because I just really felt like the composition would work well on a square canvas rather than on a rectangle. I really wanted to focus just on those main elements. Now the painting, this underpainting took me about 3 hours, maybe about 3.5 hours. Of course I've condensed this into about 40 minutes for you guys. But do take your time with the underpainting. Do just plan to have a little bit of time to really work on those lights and darks. I really do feel like the underpainting is the key element to really producing a beautiful painting. Again, you'll see me using that eraser and following those angles to make sure I get that tabletop effect. So working on that spoon now, using an eraser, and then of course back to the burnt umber. Don't forget to put the shadow of the spoon on the teacup. And again, just squinting at that photograph really shows you where all those lights and darks are. So I have switched to a very fine detail brush here. This is from a miniature brush for people who do miniature paintings, but I've got a set of these and they are quite handy for very, very tiny areas. I do prefer to use a bigger brush where I possibly can, but sometimes when you're doing these finer details, you do need to have a smaller brush. For the flowers, I put an overall colour on, just using the burnt umber, just putting one flat wash on, and then I go back with a slightly different, slightly darker tone and start to add some of the effects of the roses. Putting a few little marks on there for leaves, and I'm doing the same with the one on the cup. You get a base colour on there and then just go back with a few dark marks. Back onto the roses now, and I'm just using that typist eraser to just lift off a few lights to really give the effect of those roses. As we're coming towards the end of the underpainting, this is where I really try to focus on my contrast, my lighter lights and my darker darks. So you're really kind of rubbing back to the white of the canvas in certain places, and then of course really strengthening any shadows. The more contrast you have in your painting, the better, and it won't look flat. Back to that typist eraser now, really getting some very fine details on this spoon. Again, I absolutely love this tool, and if you don't have one, I highly recommend you go and grab yourself one. They sharpen to a lovely point, and I'm able to really get some fine details. When you have eraser dust on your canvas, you can just use a paper towel like I keep doing, just kind of flapping it over, and that will remove any eraser dust that you might have on there. So you can see how much detail I'm putting into this underpainting. Really strengthening now these darker shadows, really being brave, adding that umber on a little bit heavier and thicker. Using my finger where I need to do some blending. So I'm back with a heavier mixture now for those corners. I really want those outer corners to be nice and dark, which will really lead the eye into the center of the painting. I am softening slightly with the dome blender, but not worrying too much about over blending. We can use a mop just to take any harsh brush marks away. Here I'm using an eraser right on the side, so I'm able to create these lovely wood grain effects, just scratching out a few of those lighter areas. Give it one final wipe over and we can call that a finished underpainting. You do need to let this completely dry before you move on to doing those colour layers. So here is the finished underpainting, and here is the finished painting once I've added those colour glazes. Now I've provided this entire video for free for those of you who would like to paint along, and the link to that is in the description box below. And if you'd like to learn even more from me, do be sure to check out the Mazar Academy. So welcome to the Mazar Academy. You can click on Explore Classes and have a really good look around. And you'll really see there's something for everybody. From oils to acrylics to watercolour. And of course some of my long form courses such as my Ultimate Pet Portrait course and the Portrait course. And I'll leave a link to the Academy in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you again in the next video.